Macy's has all of your Grill Master essentials for Father's Day. Stop by to get our hand-trimmed chicken breast and certified Angus beef patties that are ready to grill, so Dad can have his favorite dinner. Make sure to browse our bakery to find the perfect no-work Father's Day treat with our decadent peanut butter bars or famous donuts. Right now, you can get boneless beef ribeye steaks for $12.99 per pound at Macy's. Shop these Father's Day essentials in-store or online at Macys.com through June 18th. Macy's, happy shopping!
Have you ever been to Thailand? Now, if you have, more than likely you saw the street dogs there. But check this out. It's estimated that there's over 1.5 million stray dogs in Thailand. Now, just think about it. It's a country with just 70 million of population. What that means is one stray dog for 70 people. Now, it's pretty crazy when you think about it, but that's where today's episode comes in. Back in 2003, John and Gill Dalley were visiting Phuket in Thailand. And on their trip, they met a dog. Yep, they met a dog. Now, you know how there's these defining moments in our lives? Well, this moment was a major defining moment for them. 21 years later, their organization has spayed and neutered over 1.2 million dogs. Now, you heard me right, 1.2 million dogs. This is more than any other organization in the world. Now you take that defining moment and these crazy individuals with determination and huge hearts, and literally you find people that are changing the country. Their organization, Soi Dog Foundation, by the way, soy means street in Thai, so think street dog. They do so much more. Their facility has a state-of-the-art veterinary clinic, and trust me, it's state-of-the-art. And they're doing so many other things. They've got this extensive mobile vet operation that's even more impressive. They're doing so many great things that we couldn't even talk about all of them during this episode. Now, kindness does not even come close to describing John. His vision and dedication is even more than admirable. So join me, definitely a human soy dog, and John Dalley as we go down their historic path and the vision Soi Dog has for the future. They're definitely barking up the right tree.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and games, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real podcast. Today, my guest is John Dalley. He's with the Soi Dog Foundation. And when we get into this thing, you guys are going to be so impressed. John, thanks for joining. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
My pleasure, Mark. No problem.
So I want to start with how you guys started the foundation. By the way, before we even get started, I want to tell you something. After doing my research, and everybody knows my research isn't as good as most, but I am so impressed with what you guys have done. And we'll get into this there because I've got so many questions. But when I look back when you guys started in 2003 and where you are today, it's phenomenal and many reasons. And we'll, as we get to the reasons why, I just want to really kind of pat you on the back and say I'm just incredibly impressed.
Thank you.
So,
okay.
Yeah, let's talk about how I know you and your wife started this thing with somebody else and all that, but can we go back in time and then we'll move forward to what you guys are doing now and all the different issues that you're working with and all that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Gill and I, we actually got married in Thailand in 96. And every year after that, we used to go back on holiday, staying at the same place. And we'd noticed each year the condition, the number of dogs on the street and the condition they were in was just far more every year. The condition was terrible. Most of them were hairless, very skeletal, and nobody really doing anything about it. What prompted us, though, particularly was something that happened in 1999 when we went over. It wasn't 98, I can't remember exactly. And we were at what they call a return guest party at the hotel where we stayed at the same hotel. And we were there, and an English lady who lived in Switzerland was there with a dog that she'd befriended. Obviously, it had been a stray dog. It was all had a neckerchief round its neck, and she'd had it to the vet and had it bathed and everything. And she was a long stay guest, but was leaving the following day and asked us if we'd keep an eye on the dog. So we said yes, we would. We'd only there ourselves for a couple more days, but that was that. And then the dog followed us back to our room. We were on the ground floor, so it slept outside on the grass just outside the room. The following morning, the dog was nowhere to be seen, but that didn't particularly worry me at the time. But then when the day moved on, still couldn't find it. And so I asked the deputy manager, the manager had disappeared, and they said, oh, yeah, well, it's not really appropriate for a dog to be on the grounds of the hotel. So we had it taken to a temple. So I said, okay, can you let me know the name of the temple, and I'll go rent a car and go visit it, maybe make a donation to the monks and whatever, make sure it's okay. So he said, well, I don't know, I'll come back to you. And he came back to me and said, no, they haven't taken it to a temple, they've taken it to the top of Phuket. Phuket's linked to the mainland by a four-lane highway bridge. And they dropped it at the top near some restaurants there. So I rented a car, went up. Nobody with my limited ties knew anything about the dog. And the following day we had to fly back. So we left messages with people that we'd give a reward and everything. Anybody found it. And it was the next time we went, only a few months later, actually, that a girl who served fruit on the beach, my wife had befriended, known her there for 2 or 3 years, told us what had happened. And in the early hours of the morning, security guards had come round, grabbed the dog, clubbed it to death, put it in a bag, and it had then just disposed of it. And I've no doubt the hotel just passed a message on to the security to get rid of the dog.
Right.
And that's how they got rid of the dog. But the reality is that was really what probably was the spark that made us think, look, when we are able, we'll move to Thailand and see what we can do to help these dogs. And that's what happened. I fortuitously was offered early retirement and a generous redundancy package from the company I was working for. And Gill, who was in banking, was able to also take early retirement. And we moved to Thailand, and with the intention of doing something to help the dogs. At that time, when we moved, there was a couple of small groups of people who were basically just feeding dogs in temples and whatever. One of them was about to leave, and I took over their temples. But we met Margot, who was a Dutch expat, married to an American, who was also had been living in Bangkok and was moving to Phuket and building a house there. And she had been doing sterilizations in the housing development she lived in Bangkok, and has come up with the name Soi Dog Foundation. Soi, by the way, means street, for people who don't know that. And she was keen to continue doing sterilization in Phuket, and I agreed with everything she was saying. This is the way to go about it. And so we joined forces, and that's when it started, really. But early days, back in 2003, you're talking just myself, Gill, Margot, a couple of other part-time volunteers, and we would bring vets over from overseas. This was through another vet who had been working on the island, and she sent more or less a supply of vets and nurses to us, and we set up mobile clinics in temples and schools, anywhere where there was literally some cover from the elements and running water and electricity. And we would be the dog catchers. We taught ourselves how to dart dogs, how to give vaccinations, how to give, anesthetic and everything. And that was how it started, just the three of us.
Well, I got a quick question for you to interrupt a little bit is, so were you and your wife really big animal advocates prior to this? Because, I mean, when you look back in 2003 and you look to where you are now, and we'll get into that later, but I mean, it's a huge commitment, but two is it's pretty phenomenal. So you had to have been like big animal advocates beforehand, or just that one dog was the real spark, and how did that work?
Yeah, not particularly. I mean, I did a bit of volunteer work in the UK occasionally for an organisation, that was sort of looking at Pet Watch and looking at people who were stealing dogs and this sort of thing, trying to catch them. But I did an undercover thing on what happened to dogs that had been euthanized. They were basically in the north of England being turned into being skinned, and the skins sent to fur factories in Germany, and then the carcasses were just minced up for fertilizer. And I sort of exposed that because that was being widely done at the time. But that was about it. And so really it was just when we moved out there, because we were still relatively young. I mean, I was early 50s, Jill was still in her 40s. We wanted to put something back into where we're going to live, our new home. And we didn't want to be laying, with no way either of us wanted to be laying on the beach all day or playing golf all the time or whatever. So we were aware of the huge issue with dogs, and being animal lovers, that was the natural thing for us to do. If we'd moved somewhere else, it could have been something totally different. I mean, Gill initially went on a course so she could learn how to teach Thai children, underprivileged Thai children, English. But she's soon, and that was the initial plan, but it was very difficult to do that. And so she joined me very, very early on with Soi Dog, doing what we do.
Well, first of all, I love the name Soi Dog. And again, like you said, street, because I'd asked you that one time when we had the conversation, Street Dog, because of all the street dogs, is a really, really great name. But what's crazy is, so I know when you got hooked up with Margot, she was doing a lot of spay and neuter, which is one of the big things you guys do. Matter of fact, you're the largest in the world now. But is that kind of how you just started, was just doing spay and neuter, or were you doing other things as well?
No, I mean, I was feeding dogs. A couple, an older British couple who left Phuket almost exhausted, I think, from trying to do something. But basically all they did was feeding dogs and taking the occasional dog from a temple to a local vet for sterilising. So I started also feeding dogs took over their temples, would go to the local hotels near us, 5-star hotels, and pick up the waste food, mix it up. Jill would cook it, and I'd take it to the local temples to feed the dog. But that was all basically. Everything else was CNVR. And when we didn't have volunteer vets, we built a relationship up with a couple of local vets who would do them for us at cost price. But we had to, raised everything ourselves in those early days. And give you an idea of how things have grown, of course. Yeah, in that first 15 months between sort of October when we started to October 23 to the end of 2024, we'd sterilised about 1,400. I've got the actual figures somewhere, but it's just over 1,400 dogs, which doesn't sound a lot when you look at what we were doing at that time. But it was very small scale, and we had no real funds. I mean, I provided, bought a truck and whatever to do things, and we bought the equipment, bought the drugs, mainly out of our own pockets at that time. But things changed really at the end of 2004. It was a huge year for a number of reasons. Firstly, as you probably know, Gill lost both her legs, nearly her life, after rescuing a dog from what is actually a flooded water buffalo field, a former rice paddock. And she contacted a rare bacterium, septicemia, and was in a coma for a long time. And I was told small chances she would survive, and if she did, she'd probably lose her arms and legs. Well, anyway, she managed to survive and just lost her legs. But that was in 2004. Now, that was just before Christmas. She insisted on coming out of the hospital in Bangkok just before Christmas so she could cook dinner for her friends. And, of course, the day after Christmas was Boxing Day 2004, and the tsunami hit. Now, you say something good comes out of something bad. What happened, of course, with the tsunami was that it really put the region on the map. And as so often happens, the large international organisations were running fundraising campaigns based on the tsunami and the animals that were misplaced through it. And we received a grant following after they'd all finished. They'd still got a lot of money there, obviously, which they hadn't used. And one of the organisations, Whisper as it was then, now WAP, wanted us to become a member of the society of theirs, so we did, and they gave us a 2-year tsunami recovery grant, which looking back wasn't a huge amount, but it did give us enough to employ our vets, 2 vets, team of dog catchers for 2 years, and a number of our sterilisations shot up to about 6,000 to 7,000 a year. Again, not huge numbers when you look at what we do now.
Well, they're big numbers still.
Well, yeah, but that was then. Margot then became ill, had to leave, and went back to Bangkok. I won't go into personal situations with her life at the time, but so she dropped out, so that just left Gill and I. And we'd been inundated with dogs at the temporary. We'd rented this building in Phuket City to act as a clinic, but we got people were dumping dogs there after the tsunami. Many people were leaving, going back to their home villages in the north, because Phuket is very much reliant on tourism, as you probably realise.
Sure.
So what happened was, what we were going to do with these dogs, and it so happened that the government had a local dog pound, which we didn't approve of, but nevertheless, what we said we would do is they would give us a run or a couple of runs in that dog pound if we paid for improvements to it, which meant putting all new fencing up and new drainage and everything else, because the place was a bit of a disaster. So we did all that, moved the dogs there, and that cut down on the sterilisations for a bit, because all our funding at that time then was, nearly all of it was going on the improvements to the dog pound. No sooner we'd done that, and of course the government turned around, authorities, and said inappropriate for a basically foreign-run organisation to be running what is a Thai government facility, and told us we needed to find somewhere else. So at that point, we then, through one of our Thai board members, we set up as a Thai foundation by that time, new land in where we are now in the north of the island. And we rented that for 10 years, a 10-year lease. And so we then had somewhere, which is still the current centre. Since that time, we've bought the land, and we've bought a lot more land in that area, and it's now a huge centre, of course.
Well, let's go backwards a little bit. I just want to do a couple numbers too. So back in that time, and I think this is from your website, in Phuket, there were like 70,000 street dogs estimated. Now, here's some crazy numbers too, and I'm going to bounce a little bit, but you were talking about doing your spay and neuter, and this is your guys' numbers. In 2003, you guys did 175 spay and neuter. Not you went through 2004 to your bigger number, and then you look at today, and I'm bouncing over the timeline, but look at 2023. Now I'm going to use that number again. 2003, you guys did 175, and in 2023, you guys did roughly 240,000. Those are huge numbers in 20 years. I mean, that's incredible to me, and I know you're all over the place, but you also mentioned something, and I want to get into this one, and we'll get back to all the spay and neuter numbers, but CNVR stands for catch, neuter, vaccinate, and return. Right. Which I think, when I read all about that, I really want to dig into that so people understand that. It's brilliant what you're doing, and there's obviously a lot of reasons for it. Can we talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into all the other stuff?
Yeah, sure, no problem at all.
By the way, I read your Arch book. I think it's phenomenal. Your Arch book that you have on your site that goes into all the different things you guys have done. Yes, it's really, really good.
There's a book I've written. There's also an orange cover. Most things are called Just Gill, which I wrote about Gill's life.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, sure. Carry it so far away. Yeah, CNVR. Right. You wanted to ask a few more questions?
Yeah, can you talk about it? Because again, catch, neuter, vaccinate, and return. And there's a reason why you do that, because a lot of different rescues all over the world, if they catch and they neuter them or they spay them or whatever, they don't return them. And there's a reason why you do that. So can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's bear in mind, first of all, probably a bit of background. Bear in mind, Thailand is predominantly a Buddhist country. And for example, if the system used certainly back in the 70s and in the 80s and still today in many shelters in the States and in Europe, dogs that aren't claimed will be euthanized. That is not part of, but it's just not going to happen. You do get people, don't get me wrong, who are poisoning dogs, shooting dogs, and one thing and another, but that is individuals. Government policy would never allow large-scale euthanasia. So you have to look, how are we going to control these numbers? And bear in mind, people quote stupid figures regarding multiplication. Bear in mind, one pair of cats exponentially over 6-7 years will create X million cats.
Right.
One pair of dogs over 5 years will be tens of thousands of dogs. The reality is, of course, that never happens, because what you've got to bear in mind is, just as with human beings in Africa and whatever, if there's a famine, you get large-scale deaths of children, whatever, which is what we see happening in countries where there's famines in Africa over the last years. And the same applies to any species or any animal. Animals can only survive on the food availability to them. And the reality is, then once you've reached that point, dogs or whatever it is will die from disease, starvation, or be killed by the dominant animals. And that's what happens, sadly. So there's an awful lot of suffering goes on. Yeah, dogs continue to breed, but the vast majority will die from starvation, or suffering, disease, or whatever, because that's what happens. And bear in mind that you get, so you'll see numbers increasing, but only if the food source is there. And that's what happens with, so in effect, what you need to do with capture, neuter, vaccinate, release. And I mean, I could talk hours on this, bear in mind. So what you're looking at is we follow certain guidelines. I don't believe in going around spraying a few dogs here, a few dogs there, whatever. You need to focus on one particular area or region and really complete that. And it took us years to, if you like, complete Phuket in relation with dogs. Today, when you look around Phuket, compared with years ago, when you see them on every street corner, every market, you'd see dogs in horrible conditions. Today, it's very unusual for you to even see a stray dog on the streets during the day. There are community dogs, what Thais call community dogs, and there are still some stray dogs, because some Thai people do not believe in sterilisation, neutering, and so they'll let the dogs have puppies and then abandon them, whether it be on the street or in rubber plantations or you name it. So you still have to run a sort of maintenance program. But what has happened in Phuket now is that what I forecast in an article I wrote years ago is that, yes, we can control the stray dog population in Phuket province, and we'll eliminate rabies there, because Phuket is the only province actually in Thailand which is recognised as being rabies-free, which is all down to because we vaccinate against rabies and other diseases at the same time. But the only thing, what happens is, if you control that population, but the food source is still there,
right, is
that something else will feed on it. And I forecast years ago what you would see would be an explosion in the cat population, in rats and mice, wild monkeys, and that is what is happening. And with rats and mice, not only do cats catch them, but that's what snakes feed off them. So you're also seeing an explosion in snakes, i.e. cobras and that type of snake. And that's what you're seeing in Phuket. We are now focusing on in Phuket on cats, because cat population has grown considerably, and they're far harder to control than dogs. But that's what we're focusing on, because dogs are no longer a problem on Phuket. Our main focus with dogs now, we have 20 mobile teams. A mobile team consists of 2 vets, 2 teams of dog catchers, and 3 nurses who work on each mobile team. They're working now. We've been working the last few years in Bangkok. And Bangkok, we've now sterilised over 500,000 stray dogs, or sterilisations. Bear in mind, unfortunately, what happens is, and a lot of people do, if you're only sterilising a few dogs in an area, then you don't keep up with the breeding, because they'll be breeding faster than you can sterilise.
Right.
And in effect, you don't have a big impact. Yes, sure, you can go along to a temple where they've got a problem with dogs and sterilise all the dogs in that temple, but other dogs will make their way in due course. And that's what will happen. So we've worked very keen on basically focusing on specific areas. I mean, the Greater Bangkok region, we've now got mobile teams in the adjoining province to the east of that called Chao Chong Sao, and now we're also having 2 mobile teams working in Chonburi, which is the next province across. In the south, we're working on the 5 provinces to the north of Phuket, and what the idea is that we will join up so that entire peninsula from sort of Bangkok down to the Malaysian border will, in probably several years to come, but nevertheless, will all be covered.
Well, here's a question that comes up all the time, because I know the magic number when you're in an area is 80% of the animals being spayed and neutered, right?
Yeah.
How do you measure that? I've heard it all the time, but I'm thinking, well, how do you know that you got 80%?
Well, what we do, and I mean, again, this is probably a little unusual, but we do surveys. We do surveys before we move in anywhere, and we do scientifically based surveys using programs developed by Global Alliance for Rabies Control and people like that, where basically you don't count every dog, but you count a cross section of different types of streets and different areas. And then you know the total mileage of streets in an area, and you can expostulate the number of dogs and come up with a fairly accurate estimate as to how many dogs are there.
Yeah, I always wondered about that. Did you read that Bhutan? I think it's Bhutan. They say they're 100% spayed and neutered. Did you see that at all?
Where's that?
Bhutan, I think it is.
Bhutan.
Yeah.
Bhutan. They're not 100% neutered in Bhutan, sadly, but they had a very active program there that was started by HSI and then passed on to the local vets. To my knowledge, last I heard from Bhutan, it's very well controlled in Bhutan, but it's not 100%. It's virtually impossible to get 100%.
Right, I know. That's what I thought when I read it, because there was an article about them being 100%, and obviously that's not a real number. I said, how can you say that? There's no way you can say that.
No. The other thing we focus on also, which probably is aware of, is that we focus on female dogs. They are number one priority. We do them both, of course, female and male. But if one of our dog catchers saw a male and a female half asleep on the road and they knew they were feral and wouldn't be able to pick them up without blow darting them to anesthetize them, they're always told to go for the female first, because if one, they'll immediately wake up and run off. And, it doesn't work instantaneously. You've got to follow the dog before it goes down. But the reality is that I've done tests. If there's a particular island we've done a big project on, quite a smallish island where there were no dogs at all in the north, just off the northeast coast of Thailand, called Koh Kut. It's got a very 5-star resort there, and other hotels have come along. And the building workers who come, the migrant workers, bring dogs with them. And when they go, they leave the dogs behind. The dogs have been allowed to breed. And the population, before you know it, you've got several hundred dogs there. Now, we've been and sterilised, we know, well over 80% of the dogs, and then monitored what happens. And the reality is, even in an isolated island, dogs will still breed, and you still need to keep on top of that.
Right.
So you do need to run maintenance programs, sadly, to keep on top. If you just went around and said, right, we've now done 80% of all the dogs somewhere, and then left that area and never did anything else again, you would find in due course that as those dogs died off, then you would get more would come in to take their place, wherever there's food there, a food source for them. What we do is, the reason we return dogs, I think that was the other question you were asking, very important, because what you're looking to do is, and it applies to rabies as well, rabies vaccination, they quote 70%, which is normal for almost a vaccination rate to build up what they call herd immunity. And if you we have this problem at the moment in Cambodia, and whereby mission rabies, for example, who go and do large-scale vaccination, they don't do sterilisation, but they're able to vaccinate tens of thousands of dogs. If then is what's happening in Cambodia, dogs are then taken off the street for the dog meat trade or whatever, you're cutting down on that figure, because you're taking away dogs that have been sterilised. It's the same with government dog pounds. If they take away dogs that are being sterilised, they're weakening that being sterilised and vaccinated. They're weakening that immunity figure. And in terms of sterilising dogs, dogs are very, dogs are territorial, as you know. They will guard, a pack of dogs will guard their area from other dogs. Now, if you've got a pack of sterilised dogs, those dogs will keep other dogs out, and they will live normally, and in due course they will die, obviously, from road accidents, maybe from accidents or natural causes, but they will die eventually. And if you manage to keep all the dogs in that area sterilised, then there's a good chance you've won. But there's always the danger if food's there and people are still having puppies and releasing them on the streets, that very rapidly the population will grow again, which is the sad thing about it. But it is still the most effective way of controlling a population, for sure. I remain convinced of that, although I've seen the weaknesses that there are in it. But that is why you must focus on a particular area. And not only do we do surveys pre and post, we do surveys every year in the areas where we're working to go back and to see the impact. We also have scientists now from the UK, from the international organisations. Dr. Ali Hebe, who's a world leading authority on dog population management, has come over and is also doing surveys with local people to see what the attitude is to stray dogs. And we've seen in Bangkok, even in the 7 years we've been operating, a huge change in the attitude of people towards the stray dogs. Instead of wanting them poisoned and taken away and shifted, you're now seeing more and more people caring for them, feeding them, because the limited numbers, and they do realise as well, where they become territorial in an area of streets or whatever, they will protect that area. If they see strangers, they will bark at them.
Right.
And they're almost become a security, an unpaid security force. All they need is a bit of dog food. And so that they've become far more tolerated now in areas, like Bangkok, and certainly in Phuket the same. The other provinces we're working in, they're still now, these are big provinces and a lot of them are very rural areas. And rural areas are one of the harder areas to control. But we still, we're working now. All our teams, mobile teams, have a target of 40 dogs per day to sterilise. And then we also have sterilisation clinics at our Bangkok clinic and also obviously in our main centre in Phuket. We also support at the moment 20 other organisations who use local vets and whatever. Normally they're sterilising around about 300 dogs a month, and we finance that sterilisation programme. So that's why it's built up to those numbers. How it's built up to those numbers, which I know you're going to ask me, from where we started. Well, yeah, there's an awful lot of hard work gone into it. A certain amount of luck always comes into it. But in reality, it is, I remember, I don't know if you're familiar in the States with Animal People newspaper. It no longer exists, but Merrick Clifton, who edited that, is still going strong. But they used to publish all the facts and figures of all the United States animal charities, what the CEOs were paid, what the turnover was and everything else, and a few overseas charities. And I remember Merritt, he came over post-tsunami to a conference there nearby, and he came over to see us. And he said, would you like me to do yours? I said, yeah, sure, no problem. And so I sent him the accounts for the following year, and he got back to me and says, John, I can't publish, this is ridiculous. He says, you're not showing any spend, everything, you're showing 100% programs. You're not showing any overheads for fundraising or anything. And I said, well, no, because I do the fundraising, online fundraising, and I don't get paid. I'm a volunteer. Gill and I have always been volunteers and always will be. I always will be. Obviously, Gill's passed away now, but, I don't get any salary needed to Gill. We do employ now nearly 500 staff, which is fact.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. But never, because unfortunately you can't rely on volunteers, obviously, when you do working this size of operation. But the reality is that Merritt said to me, well, even if you only put a figure down to value of your time, he says you need to do it because people will say,
that's not true. Yeah.
Who are big donors and whatever, they'll say you're unsustainable. Now, in reality, I didn't do that because I refused to do that. But the reality is that he was true in what he says to a degree. And the reality is, if you do not, fundraising can be a dirty word, but the reality is if you don't fundraise, you're never going to grow. And we, again, a volunteer, Leonard, American, who lived in Australia, he was interested in, he came to visit us and was blown away by what he saw and wanted to try and help. And he actually started our fundraising sort of program, digital fundraising, based around Facebook. And in fact, we were the first probably organization that used Facebook in terms of fundraising and building up following. And that made a huge difference. So it's been a gradual growth, put it that way. But like all organizations at the moment, it's a struggle to maintain that. Because sadly, the economic situation in the world and everything else, donations are harder to come by. There's more and more people after them. What's available. But that's at the moment, that's what we're doing at the moment. If you look at, we sterilized, it's now 1.2 million now it stands at just over. It'll be over 250,000 this year for sure. And we passed 1 million last August. But if you look at that, in reality, 500,000 is in the last 3 years alone. So you see, if you were to do a graph, you'd see a very slow, sort of gradual climb curve and then a huge increase. And that's down really to, basically we still plough everything back into animal programs. Yes, we employ nearly 500 staff, but they're all based on working at the shelter. The sanctuary we have, the sanctuary named after Gill has 1,800 animals in it at any one time, dogs and cats. And that includes residents of about 1,400. The others are in the hospitals. We have the largest dog hospital in Asia and the largest cat hospital, each holding around about 400 animals, up to 400 animals.
And we'll be right back. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
Let's talk about your mobile organization, because that's pretty unique. A lot of people don't say, okay, let's go to this area. But, again, I've spent a lot of time, digging into you guys. Your trucks you have, your mobile vet trucks you have are really nice, but you've taken it to a different level. I think the thing that I'm impressed by, and there's many things actually, but is how you've looked at the bigger picture. How do we make this successful? One is you guys have done more spay and neuters than any other organization in the world, which is phenomenal. But I think it's because of the way you look at it and your approach. And so how many trucks do you guys have mobile-wise and all that? Because I think that's a big key to what you're doing.
Yeah, we have, at the moment, we approached 19 full-time mobile teams at the moment, with another one starting this year. Each mobile team has 2 trucks. And then so you're talking 40 there. And then you're also talking other trucks that are operating out of the centre in Phuket and the clinic in Bangkok. I couldn't actually tell you that as it sounds, but it's probably at the moment around about 50 trucks we've got.
Wow. That's incredible. And again, let's go back in time. You see a dog at the hotel in 2003, and we're talking, it's 21 years now, I guess, but 21 years to go to that is just outstanding. It's almost you can't almost imagine it.
Well, I look back, and if you'd asked me if you asked me, Mark, 20 years ago, where we'd be where we are now, I'd said, don't be stupid. I mean, it's the same with the dog meat trade in Thailand.
Right.
When we started working on that, I said, I don't see it ended in my lifetime, but in 3 years we saw an end to it. A lot, again, there was a lot came into that. But the reality is, it's down to, it's basically, people often ask, said, look, if you're going to, I want to retire, I want to start a dog organisation and a shelter, and ask them, well, what do you want to do? And most of them will say, operate a shelter, because I've seen dogs, I want to help them. And I've had a guy, this only last week, a long champ conversation with him. He's in Chile and looking to help in the area Chile is in, and wanting to open a shelter. Said, well, look at what you're doing with a shelter is basically you're not solving the underlying issue.
Right.
All you're doing is you're taking dogs in, and what happens when your shelter's full? Because unless you've got regularly market to adopt your dogs out, your shelter's going to get full, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And just waiting on dogs, unless you can got the money to build it, make it bigger and bigger and bigger. People disagree with the fact we return dogs. I've told you why we do it. But when you're looking at our numbers, we're doing over 20,000, 23,000, more than 23,000 a month. Now, where would people like us to put those dogs?
Right.
You'd need hundreds of square miles to put 250,000 dogs in, for God's sake. It'd be impossible. And you're not doing anything to solve the underlying issue, because all that happen is those dogs, if you take them and put them in some huge, imaginary shelter that holds millions of dogs, what would you do with and then leave that area empty? That area, while there's a food source, and the problem with Thailand is the garbage control is not good.
Right.
Is that you're going to get other animals coming in more, and there will be dogs you've missed. So there's obviously some you missed, and they'll just come in and take the place of the others you've taken out. It does frustrates me greatly over the years to see government wanting to build more shelters to take the dogs off the street. And it's never worked, and it never will work, because they'll take some off the street, but they won't take them all, and the others will just reproduce and go back up to the same numbers they were before.
Well, there's other stuff there too. I mean, and again, and we're going to get into your facility there. A shelter's a great place, and obviously the dogs are being fed and all that, but you're taking them away from their real home, which wherever that is. So it's a little bit of a quality of life for them as well. They get to, once you guys take care of them, they get to go back where they're used to hanging out.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, if dogs could speak, and you asked a number of dogs in shelters, where they are enclosed, our shelter, it's not like the States because of the climate. We have open runs, which on an average, most of them hold, some of the smaller ones hold less, but most of them hold around 20 to 25 dogs. Right, each run will hold 20 to 25 dogs, and they've got the covered areas and silos. We make them attractive as possible for the dogs. We have a large number of volunteers that come from overseas, something else, and their job is to walk the dogs, give them exercise, get them used to people, and they have as good a life as we can make for them. But if you were to ask them, I'm quite sure most of them will say, "Yeah, please, can I go back to the back?
I want to go home.
Life on the street.
I want to go home."
Yeah. And obviously we don't just do stray dogs, bear in mind as well. We sterilise any owned dogs as well, because it's the owned dogs that produce the puppies that are then becoming the next generation of stray dogs.
Right.
We provide a free sterilisation service to anybody when it comes to sterilising. Our hospitals, which provide treatment, are only for stray dogs. We do not take owned dogs unless they belong to, for example, very poor Thais, migrant workers, this sort of thing. Then, we will treat those dogs. But generally speaking, we're not there to take business away from commercial vets, and we don't charge anything for treatment. We're not in competition with vets. They have a living to earn, and there's plenty of vets no shortage of vets in Thailand. Thankfully, Thailand has got some great veterinary schools.
Well,
unlike other countries.
One of the numbers I saw too, which is, again, your numbers are just, out of the park, as we would say in the U.S. But in 2023, you guys treated 21.5 thousand sick and injured dogs. 21.5 thousand. It's a huge number. The thing that really, so for the people who listen, a lot of people know, but some people don't. I have a company that does stem cell therapy. So for animals, and I'm in vet clinics all the time. And what I've seen and what your facilities are, that facility is as nice as any facility I've ever seen. You've got some you got water treadmills, you got all this other stuff that's it's just astounding.
Yeah, and bear in mind in that treatment as well, because as you mentioned, most people when they go in animal welfare, they'll be doing one or maybe two things. They'll have a shelter with an adoption program, or they'll do trap, neuter, release, generally a lot in the States for cats, or they'll do advocacy, government level, high level stuff, or they'll be giving grants. But what we do is, or they may even have an education program. What we cover is absolutely all those things. And bear in mind, we have a community outreach team who go out into the local area and they'll treat dogs on the streets where they can. So, and that because we've got volunteers, Thai volunteers who feed dogs as well, who go around. They know their dogs. And we will go around the areas in Phuket, in other provinces in the south of Thailand, and eventually we will be doing that in Bangkok as well, not at the moment. But they go around and treating animals on the street. Basically, you get an animal with a small wound. If you do nothing about it, flies in Thailand's climate will lay eggs, maggots, to become maggot infested, and before you know it, you've got a huge maggot infested wound that the dog needs to go into the hospital for and be treated and probably spend weeks and weeks in the hospital being treated. Whereas if you can catch that little wound when it's still small and treat it on the street, you're saving, not only you're treating that dog, but you're saving the space in the hospital for more serious cases. So we've got a big community outreach program as well. We also have an education program.
I wanted to get into that because you guys are really integrated, because you just built that education center, because it really comes down to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it really comes down to, in a lot of, other countries that have less income, it's really because they've had all these street dogs, and a lot of the locals are afraid of these dogs. Now, of course, you're getting less and less dogs, but it's educating the younger kids about how you treat animals and that. And can you get into, because you just finished that education center like in 2020, and what you're doing there to help them understand what they can do to help prevent this?
Yeah, well, that was the initial start. And we used to get kids, we used to bring schools, classes to the shelter, and they would have a lesson in the education center. They'd then go out and meet generally puppies, particular dogs, friendly dogs that, so they could get used to talking, being with dogs, handling them. But also that is now grown, whereby we're now teaching teachers and in the schools. And in Phuket now, the new director of education only just announced this a few weeks ago. Now animal welfare is being put onto the curriculum for the schools in our area. And this is a start where we're hoping it will expand further. We've been I'm sure maybe your listeners aren't aware, but the royal family is highly revered in Thailand, as you probably well know.
Right.
And people follow them, the Thai people follow them, and, they're treated, with utmost respect. And we just had, literally 2 weeks ago, one of the royal princesses has just adopted one of our dogs, which you saw on a Facebook page.
That's cool.
And that has obviously got coverage. And that, again, is good for us, because what it does, it shows Thai people. And the late king, who was, really worshipped by the Thai people, he had a large number of street dogs, and he even wrote a book about his own street dog. And this is sort of thing that sets example to the people as well, which we can, literally ride on the back of. That helps us a great deal when you see revered figures in Thailand being kind to street dogs and even adopting street dogs. Because sadly, what you're seeing in Asia, across Asia now, the pet industry is growing phenomenally. But sadly, most people are wanting to adopt what I call Western pedigree breeds.
Yeah.
Small dogs and whatever. And most of those are coming from, sadly, not good breeding facilities. They're just puppy farms, inbreeding, whatever. And when you see some of them, they're very poor examples of the breed because of so many faults have been bred into them. So it's sad to see that. Whereas So again, education-wise, he's trying to get across to people that the dogs are the street dog. A dog is a dog. Doesn't matter what breed it is or whatever. Some have different characteristics. Of course they do. But they're, the Thai street dogs are Thai dogs, and there's some beautiful, they're beautiful dogs. Yeah, some are terrified of people for what they've been through and will run from people, and you'll never probably be able to adopt them because they're just too frightened. But there's so many dogs that are just wonderful, friendly dogs.
Well, actually, that's something that I didn't even think about talking about, but I saw one of the things that you guys do is you get these street dogs that aren't around people, and you're training the dogs to like people. You're doing that too. I mean, you guys are doing everything. It's pretty amazing. It's really impressive.
Yeah, we have a behaviour team, quite a lot of it, six strong now, who are there purely to work with these dogs that are terrified of people.
Right.
I mean, you get exceptions. I mean, I have a dog next to me now. Cola is quite a well-known dog. He had both his front legs hacked off with a sword by a guy when he was about 9 months old, just outside Bangkok, for nibbling his toe caps of his work boots. And Cola, though, when I saw him in Bows up in Bangkok, and popped into the clinic because we'd organised his rescue basically and treatment in a private clinic in Bangkok. I went to see him a couple of weeks later, expecting to see this terrified dog cowering in the back of a cage. And there he was, licking my hand and wagging his tail. And of course, when I told Gill about this dog, there was no doubt where that dog was going to end up because he came down to us. But he loves everybody. But it's unusual. I mean, most dogs that have been victims of cruelty, and we see some horrendous cruelty cases, it can be very difficult for them to learn to trust people. But you do get exceptions, some just do, some do still trust people. But a lot of dogs has been feral, living in the jungles, because we get quite a few who have, we've got about, I think it's 230 of the dogs now in the shelter are amputees, and they've been caught in snares, which are set not for dogs, but for wild pigs. But the dogs, feral dogs living in the jungle, are also sort of hunting for bits and pieces, what they can find, get caught in these traps, and they'll chew the legs off and whatever to get out of them. Or the trapper, if he comes along, will just take the trap off and leave. So we end up with an awful lot of amputee dogs, mainly through that reason.
Well, the other thing is that most people don't realize that dogs get PTSD just the way humans do. So if they've been abused, they've got the same issues going on.
Exactly, yeah. And so that's why, again, don't be wrong, we've a lot of the only dogs we keep, the dogs that come into our shelter are either victims of cruelty and abuse, because you cannot get a dog in that's been, with say a couple of harpoons in its side, and you come and you treat that dog and you get it well there, and then put it back where it came from, because same thing's liable to happen again. So we keep dogs who are victims of cruelty and abuse. We also keep dogs that come in who have got old on the street, are becoming infirm, blind, or whatever.
Right.
They can no longer survive on the street, so they come in. But those dogs, not very rare do you get one adopted. We got actually strange, but and sadly our adoption market is shrinking all the time, because Thais generally will only adopt puppies and kittens. They're not interested in adult dogs. So as you know, we have adopted dogs overseas. Many of our dogs have gone, we're not talking vast numbers, but dogs have gone to the States, gone to partner rescues in the States, found homes there. And a lot of our volunteers who come fall in love with a particular dog and want to take that back to their own country. But it's becoming harder. The new regulations in the States have made it more difficult. It has been rescinded to an extent now, but it makes it far more expensive. And Canada have introduced a ban.
I wanted to ask you about that ban, but real quickly, did you guys, like over here, most of the shelters here are overflowing right now because of the pandemic. So what happened was a lot of people during the pandemic got animals that they shouldn't have, and they brought them back. So they're all like overflowing. So I'm assuming that would affect your adoption area too.
Yeah, of course it does. It's same in the UK. I mean, people are opposed, obviously. I mean, people are quite right. They'll say, well, why adopt a dog from Thailand if when there's a dog next door in the States in a
Right.
shelter near me,
Right.
which I fully appreciate and fully understand. Having said that, people are free to do, to adopt where they want.
Right.
And people see our dogs or whatever on Facebook or whatever, and maybe they feel an affinity to that dog, or they've been over, because we get a lot of visitors, volunteers from the States and Europe, and they want to, they meet the dogs and they fall in love with a particular dog. So they want to take that dog home. So we're not going to say, no, you can't do it. Obviously not. Because, like I've already mentioned, with shelters, you reach a peak. And after that peak, our shelter is now, at least 4 times the size it was when we originally got the original land all those years ago. And we're having to buy land all the time, and land is not cheap here in areas like Phuket.
Hey, John, one thing I want to bring up, because again, I apologize for interrupting, but I have this philosophy that when you travel, you should always try to do some volunteer work wherever you are. And you guys have a huge volunteer program. Can you talk a little bit about that for the listeners? Because, a lot of Americans travel to Thailand pretty regularly. And it would be a great opportunity, because I always tell people, and you guys go, I think the youngest you have to be with an adult is 8 or whatever, but it's a great way to reteach your kids if you happen to be there and you're there and volunteer. Can you talk about your program and maybe something that somebody's traveling, their way to give back? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. It's basically people come over. We get return volunteers coming over and over again, and they will come and maybe volunteer a 2-week holiday and volunteer their entire 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever at the shelter. And they do that regularly. We even have people come and to volunteer for 2 weeks, and they're still there 3 years later. It's a case of that sort of volunteer you could do, but also you can come on a holiday. You can just come up and visit or spend a day. It's a case of you won't be doing as much as somebody who's volunteering for a long period of time, because there's a certain, we can't just give you dogs and say, off you go. But generally speaking, what it is, it's walking the dogs, taking them in the pool, off-lead areas so they can play. And it's the highlights of the dog's day. And it was very difficult during the pandemic, the COVID outbreak, because literally the dogs there were no volunteers. We got a few Thai volunteers that would come up, and 1 or 2 local people would come and help. But literally the large numbers we used to get from overseas just didn't happen. And all of us, the staff, myself, everything, were up there walking dogs, because it's socializing them, and it's so vital for them. It's what they really love doing. But they love to go out for a walk. It's the highlight of the day, even though they've got plenty of room to walk around it, to run around and play.
But it's different. It's association, and I would challenge for everybody who's listening, if you're going there to volunteer for multiple reasons. One is, I would bet this 100%. If you do go and volunteer and give back, it may be the best vacation you ever have, because it'll be when you give, you get a lot more, and it'll be more rewarding. You'll go back. That trip to Thailand, we went to Soi Dog, we did this stuff, but we went to the beach, we did all the other stuff, but we got to do that, and it was really, really rewarding.
Yeah, most people that go are blown away by what they see.
Right.
You'd be amazed how many comments on Facebook, is this genuine or whatever? But yeah, it is totally genuine, and all our figures are totally genuine. There's nothing made up, nothing exaggerated, and those are, that's what we do, and people come and see it for themselves, and generally are blown away by what they see, particularly in Phuket. We're building, hopefully start at the end of this year, building a hospital in Bangkok. We have a clinic there at the moment, but that's a rented premises, to build it on the same standard as you see in Phuket.
Well,
so hoping to do that, start breaking ground hopefully before the end of the year.
Well, we're going to run out of time, but I wanted for everybody listening, a couple things is if you go to your website, and we'll get it. If you, John, what's the actual www address?
www.soidog, SOI, not soy as in soy sauce, but SOIDOG.org, which is short for organisation. And if you look on there, you'll see there's a whole section on volunteering, who to contact. There'll be advice on where to stay if you're volunteering, predominantly at Soi Dog. We have a bus. We recommend a local on the coast, a little town only 10 minutes drive away, where there's plenty of restaurants and beach and things to do in the off time and in the evenings. And we have a bus that goes down there to pick people up. So everything's there, and it'll tell you all about it. And you can read, all sorts about Soi Dog on the website.
John, we're going to have to do a follow-up because we didn't get into half the things you guys do, disaster relief, the cat and dog meat trade. But at some point it gets too long. But for you guys that are listening out there, please go to the website. And you guys are on all the social media channels. And I'll have that on the thing. But when you see the facilities, I promise to every listener out there, when you go to the website and you see the facilities, I will bet you that more than likely the vet clinic that you may go to may not be as nice as yours there. It's state of the art.
Yeah, I mean, we got Gill. It was designed entirely by Gill. It was the last thing I think she gave her life doing it, but she spent 4 years going around the world, getting all the information from people. In fact, we even have things you don't see down to the type of tiles that are used, because tiles, people don't realize, do absorb moisture, so they can absorb disease. These tiles don't. We have UV and all the air circulation, sterilizing everything. So all sorts of things that you don't even see there. It is state of the art for sure, as far as we can make it. And yeah.
Now, a couple other.
Another one maybe sometime with, because we're not touched on the dog meat trade, which is a big thing we're involved in still. Not in Thailand anymore because we got it banned there, but in other countries, particularly Vietnam, Philippines, and Cambodia shortly.
Well, I definitely want to do a follow-up because there's a lot of things we want to cover. But, back to the listeners there for you guys looking, when you see the state of the art, again, volunteer there. But for them to, once they see that, you have a donation thing on the website as well and all that. How can they help you in other ways too? Let's talk a little bit about that before we finish.
Yeah, well, obviously, donation, we can only do, and I say this about any charity, any foundation, you can only do as much as the funds you raise. The more funds we're able to raise, the more we can do. And very important as well, I think, for people to know that what they're donating to, the money's going where they want it to go. And it's going, yes, we do have the fundraising budget, but, we have no high paid executives on sort of 6-figure salaries and this sort of thing, nothing like that at all. The money is first goes so much goes directly on the programs. And because of that, people's generosity, we're able to expand our programs. About more than 50% of our donations come from the States. But it's just difficult for people to understand sometimes, or to be sure when you're living over there, well, is this genuine or not? And all I can do is, we do have platinum seal of approval and everything in fundraising monitors.
They just need to go to your website. They can see everything. You don't have to even go there. I'm telling you, for you guys listening, I know this stuff that's on there. What you also have, you have a store too where people can buy stuff, and I'm assuming the majority of that goes to your. It's basically by getting something, you're by buying something, you're giving back to you guys as well, which I think is a clever way of doing it.
Yeah, we have an online store which is run by a volunteer here in the UK, and that's we have also a store at the shelter, but the online store where you can order for things, and that order things online. That's that's on the website as well. You'll see shop there. That gets posted from the UK.
Well, I'll tell you something funny, John. So I was looking at it. You've got that shirt where Ricky Gervais is wearing it. I've been trying to get him on this show forever. I've talked to his agent. He goes, well, Ricky's doing his thing. I was so jealous when I saw his picture. And I'm going, I've been trying to get him on forever on this thing. It's pretty funny.
He did a video for us along with Judy Dench and others on the dog meat trade many years ago, back in 2011.
Well, you're one up on me because I've been trying to get him because he's a big, huge animal advocate on that. So last thing, I know I mentioned to you about telling a joke. I can't remember. Are you going to tell a joke or not? Because that's at the end of the show. I've got one.
You better have one. I don't remember jokes. Never remember a joke.
Well, I have to write them down too. And by the way, for everybody that's out there, I know they're cringing, and you're going to cringe when you hear it, John, because they're so bad. So my joke for today is: what do you call a black Eskimo dog?
Dusky.
Oh, pretty good. A dusky husky. That's what God, you're way more clever than I am. A dusky husky. Pretty good. Anyways, for everybody out there listening, obviously I need help with jokes. If you've got I know clearly. So if you've got your children that want to tell a joke, or you've got a friend that wants to tell a joke, you can email me, please do, and I'll put you on the show. Please me. I would rather not have to tell the jokes myself. It's at mkyleforrealpodcast.com. If you've got a great idea for the show, like Soi Dog, we want to get that information out. Let me know. I get back to everybody. I really do. But most importantly, John, thanks so much for taking the time. We are going to do now. I'm going to hold you to. We're going to do another episode because we got to cover everything. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know we had some problems getting connected here, but I really, really appreciate it.
No worries. I'm always happy to speak to people about dogs.
Yeah, well, I'm always happy to listen too. And then for everybody else who's out there listening, please pass the word, keep following and all that. But, I really appreciate you guys listening to these things because we do want to get these messages out. But really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. For real.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.
Macy's has all of your Grill Master essentials for Father's Day. Stop by to get our hand-trimmed chicken breast and certified Angus beef patties that are ready to grill, so Dad can have his favorite dinner. Make sure to browse our bakery to find the perfect no-work Father's Day treat with our decadent peanut butter bars or famous donuts. Right now, you can get boneless beef ribeye steaks for $12.99 per pound at Macy's. Shop these Father's Day essentials in-store or online at Macys.com through June 18th. Macy's, happy shopping!